Discussions of sex and gender have been important to feminists for many years, but they've also been problematic in many ways. So let's start with, why is gender so important to feminists? I mean, look at the name. Feminine is actually in the name. And primarily, women have been oppressed because of their sex, and it's often been the opposite sex doing the oppressing. Not always, but often. Additionally, feminists have relied on sex gender distinctions for theoretical and political purposes. It's allowed feminists to argue that, other than reproduction, women and men are pretty similar. We have tons in common, so we can be equals, right? So, why are these things a problem for Butler? Well, it's because of power. Power structures in our society continue to use the concepts of gender to compel men and women into certain acceptable gender behaviors. To feminists, women haven't always been treated equally because of these power structures that are based in sexual difference. And it's really not fair. But are the ideas I've just mentioned, that even some feminists accept about men and women, even true? In the preface you read, Butler raised a lot of questions about this idea. So I'm just going to go through some of them very quickly. What if gender isn't natural? What if there's nothing innately male or female? What if the binary categories of male female are really much more complicated? What if being female has nothing to do with having a vagina or ovaries and is really about what our societies tell us women should be? What if gender's been used to get individuals to adhere to social standards like heterosexuality? What if power structures that exist don't just regulate relations between genders, but actually create gender? What assumptions do I have about being female, or maybe you about being male, that have no meaning outside of cultural norms? Can we trace the formation of gender norms by studying the institutions of power that have created them? And what would happen if society rejected the binary categories of male female? Would society crumble? Would families be destroyed? Or are there benefits to radically changing the way we think about gender? Yeah, I guess gender is pretty troubling, isn't it? Luckily, Butler has some good ideas about the best way to get into this trouble. First, she asks us to imagine a scenario. What if a sexed body could exist prior to any culture? Would differences in genitalia have any meaning? So outside of society, does anything have any meaning? Or is it the cultural inscriptions on our bodies that give our bodies meaning and give our lives meaning? So maybe the entire category of sex is problematic. Butler thinks so. I kind of imagine it this way: a society in which people had never heard of the concept of man or woman, but were instead compelled to dress or act in certain ways based on their eye color. I'm not saying the society would necessarily be any less oppressive, but just imagining it illustrates how illusory sex gender categories might actually be. Again, why does it matter? Isn't our system working pretty well for most people? Maybe. But these categories are being used to control our bodies, and because of this, Butler argues that our bodies are extremely important. She even put it in the title of this chapter: Subversive Bodily Acts. We use our bodies to both communicate social norms or to deviate from them, and even create new social norms if we're lucky. Not in a vacuum, but new ones can be created. So, Butler has an issue also with the body mind dualism. She admits that many great thinkers, and probably most people, assume that there is this body mind dichotomy, that they're separate and distinct and have their own purposes. This idea is ingrained in Western culture and our religions. The mind, or sometimes called the soul, is that internal part of us, that thing that's really me. Descartes even said, "I think, therefore I am." The body, on the other hand, is just a vessel that expresses what's inside of us. But just because people believe something doesn't mean it's a perfect idea. In fact, Butler thinks it's hogwash. Okay, she used more intellectual terms, but she points out that our discussions about gender are often meant to make cultural taboos and boundaries that are forced on us seem natural, so that people won't use their bodies to violate these taboos. To Butler, though, there's no essential nature, there's no language, no values, no things such as man or woman outside of our culture and societies. She doesn't believe ideas pre exist and bubble up from within us. She believes they're passed on to us from within a historical and cultural context. So to her, a mind body distinction isn't necessary. They can't be separated. they work together. And the body is not just a vessel, it's what we use to communicate our ideas, our gender, and the things that have been passed on to us. So she even uses Foucault's idea that rather than being internal, a soul is something that's around us and on us and within us. And it happens because we internalize those laws, those rules of our society. It may not be how we feel inside, but what we express is what matters. So the truth is, gender doesn't always flow seamlessly from sex, desire, or sexuality. In actuality, there are a variety of genders, sexualities, and if you've been on the internet lately, you know there's a variety of desires. Butler actually describes three dimensions of the body that all depend on each other and all are fluid. So there's anatomical sex, our gender identity, and our gender performance. And we can mix and match these as necessary, as we desire. So much variety exists within human bodies, and we need to learn to appreciate it. I mean, just look at this chart, and it probably doesn't even capture every option that's available to us as human beings. So, you still think there are only two genders? I don't know. If we continue to conceptualize gender, though, as this stable binary concept, male versus female, we might never be able as a society to escape compulsory heterosexuality. And I think Adrienne Rich kind of showed us some of the problems with that. Okay, before I end this, I should probably include some important definitions. Butler said that gender identity should be rethought as a personal, cultural history of received meanings subject to a set of imitative practices which refer laterally to other imitations and which jointly construct the illusion of a primary and interior gendered self or parody the mechanism of that construction. Duh. Okay, maybe that one wasn't very clear. Let's try this one. Gender is thus a construction that regularly conceals its genesis. The tacit collective agreement to perform, produce, and sustain discrete and polar genders as cultural fictions is obscured by the credibility of those productions and the punishments that attend not agreeing to believe in them. The construction compels our belief in its necessity and naturalness. All clear? Okay, I'll give it to you in my words too. Gender is acting in a way that either you've been told you should act, or in a way that someone else who shares your genitalia has acted, or in a subversive manner, acting completely opposite or differently than those things. Either way, you've practiced it so many times and you're so convincing with your act that you, and pretty much everyone else, believes it actually naturally flows out of you. So, in summary, practice doesn't make perfect, it makes gender. And if you don't do it right, you'll probably be punished in some way. But I'm actually hoping your generation can change that.